Well, the last night was interesting.
Interesting in a good way.
About to go see The Last Night now. This is going to be the greatest movie of all time. It's going to be better than the Emoji Movie. How you doing back there, Mr. Bang? You doing alright, buddy?
I know where you live.
This is going to be the greatest movie of all time. Seriously, I'm pumped.
Do not ever put me in.
Don't think I've forgotten about you, buddy. Let's get you all nice and comfy.
This seat is comfy.
What the f did I just watch? That was the worst goddamn movie I've ever had to watch, and I watched Freebirds, babe. Do you know how bad Freebirds was? You made this movie. You made this abomination. How do you feel? Hey, Alex, how big's the hole in your heart after watching this movie? If I'm gonna be completely honest, I went into The Last Night expecting a subpar movie at best. I didn't expect anything spectacular after Age of Extinction, even though I did enjoy that movie a bit more than the two before it. So I was kind of hoping that The Last Night would continue to raise the standards for me of the Transformers movie franchise. It did not. I don't even know where to start. There's so much to cover with this movie. It was a mess. I will be covering spoilers in this video, though I'll let you know when. I'll start off with some more general things for those who haven't seen the movie yet and want to, though I don't know why you would want to. Now, this video is not an attack on anyone that enjoyed it. If you enjoyed the movie, that's great. I'm not saying it's bad. I just want to be completely honest as I can in this video without pulling any punches. But don't think it's an attack on you personally. Remember, everyone is allowed to have their own opinion. You are, and so am I. So just remember that and be considerate. Thanks. Let's start with my general complaint about the whole thing. I have to give the creators credit because they somehow managed to make something that goes for 2.5 hours feel rushed. The entire film just seems thrown together. Everything passes by so quickly and we barely have time to process anything before another explosion goes off and the location and plot is changed. It felt as if the film was going at 100 miles an hour, and if you so much as blinked, you're gonna get lost. I had basically no idea what was going on at some parts, because everything happened so goddamn quickly. There's way too much in this movie that they wanted to include, and as a result, a lot of things that they overhyped the hell out of in the trailers and promotion go by in literally a few seconds. It's ridiculous. Even Age of Extinction had better pacing than this. The movie is all over the place. One minute we're here, and then the next we're here. It's absurd and incredibly hard to follow, especially for those joining this franchise for the first time. But don't worry, there's always time for awkward sex jokes, because those are always hilarious, aren't they, babe? Aren't they, babe? Thankfully, The Last Night has a lot less of these, because there's so few time to catch our breath in this movie. Considering that the movie is so plot-heavy, you'd think that they'd give us some time to process what was going on, but it's just one discovery, and then an action sequence, and then a plot progression, and then more action sequences. Give us a break, for Primus' sake. It becomes more confusing as it goes on, and by the end of it, I just gave up trying to understand what was going on. I mean, even friggin' Revenge of the Fallen had more coherency than this movie. I'll get more onto that later, but I can't go on without spoiling anything.
Can you stop being so negative? I put a lot of work into this movie. Give me some credit. All you do is sit here and watch and talk.
Okay, babe, let's talk about what this film does right.
Yeah.
The Last Night, like every other Transformers film, is visually beautiful to look at. The CGI is great as always, and the sets, locations, and camera work is great. The film looks good, that's all I can say. It's a shame that it has to go and ruin it with... positive. The film, of course, has a lot of action. It wouldn't be a Michael Bay film if it didn't.
LOL.
Though I personally didn't feel that the honestly limited fight scenes in this movie were as good as they've been in the previous films. A lot of the coolest bits were shown in the trailers, and that's really all you get. If there's one thing I can commend this film on, it's the fact that it at least attempts to give the Transformers some more character. The film has a heavy emphasis on the Transformers being around on Earth for a long time, and we're treated, or tortured, with some scenes of the Cybertronians fighting in the times of World War II and King Arthur. But it doesn't go any further than what they showed in the trailers. I have to admit, I initially thought the idea of incorporating Transformers on Earth in the medieval ages was a stupid one, but it sort of grew on me. However, it was honestly disappointing and poorly executed in the movie. We don't really get that much of it, and that's not me saying I would have wanted more, but those scenes only exist to make things more convenient for the plot later. It's disappointing, but then again, so is this entire movie.
Positive.
The Autobots are slightly more fleshed out in this film. I mean, for once, they have more speaking lines than I have fingers. That's a first. Drift, Hound, and Crosshairs are back, and the same as they were in Age of Extinction, but they don't really do anything aside from shoot things. The human characters this time round weren't too bad, just really bland and boring. Mark Wahlberg as Cade was pretty okay, Isabella was surprisingly less annoying than I thought she would be, and the movie has this whole theme of her finding family amidst the Autobots and Cade, and while not a bad idea on paper, it wasn't really done that well in the film. Discount Wally over here was surprisingly not that terrible, as he didn't have as much screen time as I thought he would. Thank Primus. Wheelie was also in this movie for some reason. I doubt anyone was happy to see him back, but at least he was there if anyone wanted him, and he was just as annoying as ever. How lovely. Oh, and Topspin was there. I don't know why, but he was, and that's cool, I guess. The Dinobots are also there for about 5 seconds, but...
Positive.
If there's anything I can say about this film, it's that the writers at least tried to wrap a neat little bow around everything. Pretty much all of the human characters from the previous movies returned. This includes Lennox, who was heading the anti-Transformer task force in this film. Mark Wahlberg is back, and though she's not in the movie, his annoying as shit daughter Tessa gets a mention in an honestly quite sweet and heartfelt scene that lasts for about 2.5 seconds before the movie cuts away.
Why do you not understand the word positive?
Shut up! Your movie was shit. Just deal with it. Simmons was back for some reason, though he didn't do anything in the film. I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention, but he was on a phone and that was it? Like, was that the joke? Starscream's somehow still intact severed head shows up, which was a nice Easter egg. Even good old Sam Witwicky gets a mention. If there's one thing this movie has, it's continuity. Even though the plot thread of the Transformers being on Earth for a lot longer than we've seen prior completely erases all of the fantastically written expanded material, but...
Yeah, that's fine, I guess.
The humor in The Last Night is awful. All of the jokes fall flat. It's genuinely embarrassing, some of the jokes in this film. Pretty much all of the dialogue felt forced. Granted, most of it was just incessant screaming, but still. Certain things were played out for laughs, but it was just awful. The only time when I genuinely laughed in the movie was when my mind finally shattered and I realized how ridiculous the film was. Frustratingly, continuing on from my point about the movie seeming rushed, nothing is really ever explained. If you go straight from Age of Extinction to The Last Night without having caught up with all of the trailers and promotional material, you're gonna be very confused. Because things in this movie just happen. They just happen and everyone just rolls with it. Megatron's in a new body? Okay. Drift is red now. Alright. Megatron has a bunch of new Decepticons that are apparently important enough for him to know by name that we've never seen before. Okay. Barricade's just shown up again after disappearing. Alright. Bumblebee can get blown up and can for some reason put himself back together. Okay. There are mini Dinobots now. Cool, I guess that's fine. I didn't want an explanation anyway. You know what did get an explanation though? Optimus's red helmet. At least they explained that. I'm glad the writers have got their priorities straight.
You are overreacting.
Yeah, well you're fired! Okay, I'm talking about spoilers now. I can't take it anymore. Spoiler warning for anyone who hasn't seen the movie. Stop watching. Don't go watch it, just go cry somewhere, believe me, you're not missing out on anything. Let's talk about the characters. The Autobots are fine. I appreciate they actually spoke words in this one. Hound was starting to grow on me, and there was one part where he stood up against the Decepticons and it looked like he was going to die, but then he didn't. The movies are apparently a lot more lenient with killing off characters with names now. That's why this film and the one before it were filled with so many goddamn generics. I did like the scenes of the junkyard with the Autobots messing around though. It was a temporary calm in what is otherwise a very loud movie. Reminds me a little bit of Robots in Disguise too, which was nice. Another cool concept that began at the beginning of the movie was the idea of the Transformers being refugees on Earth, particularly the ones who were allowed to take refuge in Cuba. The film started off pretty good and honestly wasn't that bad initially. I was quite excited within the first quarter of it. It just unfortunately got worse over time. The biggest trigger thing for me in this movie was how it treated the Decepticons. I was excited for Megatron and Barricade. Why was I excited for Megatron and Barricade? Once again, Megatron does f*** all in this movie. He's there for absolutely no reason, as are all the other Decepticons. Speaking of, the film has the audacity to introduce a bunch of absolutely horribly named Decepticons in some sort of demented and out-of-place intro sequence. Why? I like the concept of Megatron getting the band back together, but it doesn't work in the sense that Barricade is the only Decepticon we've seen before, even though he feels completely different to the original one and could pass as a completely separate character. Transformers is a franchise with a colossal amount of characters to choose from, and yet the filmmakers let, what, like a 3-year-old create these new ones? They didn't even try. I mean, granted they at least gave some effort into giving them more personality, but all that encompasses too is raunchy humor and annoying as hell voices. Bay really seems to find it funny when he gives the giant robots stupid voices.
It tickles my funny bones.
So the Decepticons are introduced and are absolutely horrible. Right. Freaking Freaking Nitro Zeus. Are you serious? Did you actually name a Transformer Nitro Zeus? It's like they just put two cool sounding words together and went with it. I can do that too. Introducing Turbo Poseidon. It's stupid. It's freaking stupid. I hate this movie. The Decepticons are set up with name tags and everything and then are killed in seconds. Why? Freaking Onslaught, who was promoted as being one of the characters in the film, was decapitated within 2 seconds of being on screen. No! That is not okay. You can't do that. And now for everyone's favorite character, Hot Rod. Hot Rod. Hot Rod was dumb. I was disappointed when there was no little lady, no! That was my favorite part of the trailer. Sadly, he was replaced by the Pink Panther, which wasn't funny. That was the joke, by the way. He has a French accent and doesn't like it. Hilarious. I don't know who this character is, and I don't care. He serves no purpose in the movie aside from serving as the most pathetic comic relief I've ever seen. He was even worse than that guy in Age of Extinction, but at least he died. Now, while Megatron was hyped up as hell in this movie to be a massive player in the plot, he does probably less than Bay does when making these movies. The real villain here is Quintessa, who I actually really liked the design and voice of. I thought she was actually quite formidable for a little bit. But the issue was not only how sparsely she appeared in the film or how quickly she was taken out in the most anticlimactic way possible, it was how she was introduced. And by that I mean she wasn't introduced at all. She was just there all of a sudden, as was Cybertron. Okay. As I said, nothing is ever explained. It just happens in this film. We're just supposed to nod our heads and roll with it, I guess. When was she a thing? At what point did she show up? When was Unicron a thing? Oh, and on that, I will admit to my mistakes. I'm sorry, Internet. Please forgive me, I'm sorry. A while back, I said that I was certain that Unicron and Nemesis Prime weren't in this movie. I was wrong. Unicron wasn't properly explored in this movie, only name dropped to set him up for the next film, which was okay, I guess. They reused the concept of Unicron being in the Earth, or Earth, from Transformers Prime, and it was fine, I guess. I like the way they did the horns. I must admit, it's something I'm looking forward to seeing them ruin in the next couple of movies. What wasn't okay was the completely pointless name-dropping of Nemesis Prime. Quintessa dubs Prime Nemesis Prime, and it's completely ridiculous. The scene where he slaughters the knights and shouts, "I am Nemesis Prime," was dumb, and I hated it. This is thanks in part to the fact that Optimus was Nemesis for literally 5 minutes. The trailers deceived us in thinking that the evil Optimus Prime was going to be a big part of the movie, but it lasted about as long as Michael Bay does in putting an explosion in the film. It sucked. Optimus being evil was a concept I was looking forward to being explored, even if it was done poorly, but I forgot to take into consideration that they might not even explore it at all, which is exactly what happened. He goes around, hits Bumblebee once, threatens some humans, doesn't even kill them, and then fights Bumblebee a bit. What have I done? I'm so evil! The fight between Optimus and Bumblebee was anticlimactic and really, really disappointing. I mean, it was still satisfying, but you pretty much seen all of it in the trailers. There wasn't any more to it than there was in the trailers. Prime hits Bumblebee, Bumblebee somehow gets his voice back for some reason, and then Optimus breaks out of his Nemesis state because the power of friendship. It was dumb, and I hated it, and this movie is dumb. That's not even to mention how frustrating the confrontation between Megatron and Optimus is. How dare the film try and, have dialogue between them like, "Oh, you were my brother once." They've never seen each other in the movie. Who cares? It wasn't even a fight like the trailer made it look like. He just hit him out of a window and that was it. Ugh. Why is Megatron even in these movies? Why do they bother anymore? Screw you, writers. Okay, this was pathetic. Megatron may as well be dead because he does absolutely nothing in these movies. Oh, it was so disappointing. I was seriously looking forward to, because if there's one thing the movies do usually do well, it's the fight scenes, and yet there was nothing for Optimus and Megatron. It was pathetic. It was just... Optimus was just pathetic in this movie. Absolutely and utterly pathetic. It was sad, really. He had so little speaking lines and so little involvement that it just seemed like he was unnecessary, aside from, Optimus Prime. He doesn't really do that much as Nemesis, cries about, "What have I done?" afterwards, and then gets the shit kicked out of him without fighting back. He, like every other character in this film, didn't really do that much, and as I said, it was incredibly disappointing considering the marketing. Dragonstorm was the focal point of the hype of many, and while he did do about as much as I thought he would, that be falling over and flying around a bit, it was interesting that he was a combiner. As was the newly introduced Infernocons, who combined into the very short-lived Infernicus. Both were cool to look at, but once again didn't last very long. It was interesting how the film couldn't be bothered having them combined properly, and just so had them meld together like Play-Doh. I wasn't a fan of the sudden medieval theme with Transformers. All of a sudden there are these generic knights showing up everywhere and this magical talisman that morphs himself with Cade and reveals itself in the most anticlimactic way ever at the end of the movie as a sword. Whoa! Cogman's character was basically to serve as an uncomfortable comic relief, but it was so awfully shoved into the movie that it hurt. Why is he a human-sized Transformer? Why is he a butler? I don't know. The film doesn't either. I guess the writers just thought it would be funny. Well, it wasn't! The British woman in the movie, what was her name? I don't care. She was annoying and pointlessly added to the movie. She seemed almost like Rey from The Force Awakens, not because of the British accent, but because she was a character from a line of great importance that was all of a sudden thrown into the franchise without any previous mention. To be honest, all she really served to do was to be a forced-as-hell love interest for Cade Yeager, and it was just... The introduction of the Witwicky line was an interesting plot point, including the brief mention of Sam, who, by the way, they alluded to being dead, thank God, but once again it was so quickly glossed over that it was frustrating. The plot was forced and constantly thrown in your face, but paced way too quickly. The movie made me dizzy with how quickly it progressed. However, despite all of these very easy critiques, if you look past how the movie is executed, just think back to something that Bay himself said. I make movies for teenage boys. What a crime.
I never said that.
The movie looks cool. The final battle is freaking awesome if you stop focusing on all the technical things. The humans and Transformers fighting side by side was pretty sweet, and the visuals were fantastic. And surprisingly, actually was as huge as it was alluded to being. Even if all of the characters, except for the Dinobots, because who cares about them, am I right, showed up out of nowhere like it was some sort of bad fanfiction. I enjoyed the final battle a little bit unlike the rest of the film. It doesn't make sense because quite frankly none of the people working on it cared enough to make it make sense. It did its job, albeit crappily, but still set up the rest of the franchise with the introduction of Unicron. Yay, time to wait a few more years for the next one. At least Age of Extinction tried to make its humans interesting. I like the villain in Age of Extinction a bit, and the movie gave some time for the characters to speak and develop a little. The Last Night doesn't even bother. Lennox and Simmons are in it for absolutely no reason aside from the movies wanting to acknowledge that they remember that they exist, and the most interesting human in the film was this stupid nerd character at NASA, whose only job was to keep shouting stuff about science to remind the audience of how amazing everything that was happening was. The human task force didn't really do anything either. Their existence was only so that the movie had an excuse to include chase scenes. Was it the worst movie ever? No. Definitely not. It still had its enjoyable moments, and there were a lot of aspects that I quite liked, just not nearly as much as the stuff I didn't like. It just ended up as a completely different product than what the trailers made it look like, and it honestly doesn't feel like its own proper standalone movie. Overall, worse than Age of Extinction, but not as bad as the technical scene of Revenge of the Fallen. I rate it 2 little ladies out of...